Hi, I'm Rob Langton from Development Ready. Our interview series delves into the lives of Australia's most respected property thought leaders and decision makers and uncovers what makes them tick. This is The Interview. Our next guest this morning is Mark Stevens, founder and managing director of Kokoda Property Group. Mark, thanks for your time this morning. Before we get into the property side of things, what were you doing in your early career prior to your involvement within property?
Early days for me was studying accounting, and then I started in the retail game. So my first job out of university was Country Road Clothing. After that, Roger David, and then after that, Jeans West. So I became a retailer by default and learnt my craft in accounting.
Nice. And what have you seen from being a former retailer? What are you seeing in the retail space at the moment? How's it changed since you were involved in the 90s?
Don't own one. Hard work, small margins, a lot of competition, a lot of pressure on rents. It's just difficult, you know. A lot of overhead in terms of people, small margins in clothing particularly, and you can live and die by your season.
And you founded Kokoda Property Group in 1997. Where did the interest in property development come from, and what were some of the early projects that you were developing in that period of time?
The motivation to leave retail, you know, at that time I was a senior person at Jeans West Clothing, and I was really at a point in my life where I wanted to take control of something, and I had the choice of going into property or other asset classes, and property was something that I kind of just had a general interest in because you can see it being created. So I really started as a young guy trying to learn, you know, where to buy it, how to raise money, how to get debt, what to renovate, what not to renovate. So it was a real morphing from, I knew what I didn't want to do, and I realised that was retail, and I kind of knew what I wanted to do, and I thought that was property, and so I went on a bit of a search.
And what are some of the early projects you developed? I think you were doing sort of luxury home builds in the eastern suburbs here in Melbourne.
It started out as townhouses in the outer east, Burwood, Ashburton, was where I started the craft of understanding, you know, how to construct something and how to renovate something. Then, as I became fascinated with architecture particularly and the creativity process, I got involved in more luxury houses, understood that, and then came in closer to the Melbourne CBD. So I was in Canterbury, Balwyn and areas like that, and then eventually morphed into Toorak and South Yarra, and really enjoyed the creative process, but understood that there may not have been the return that I was hoping for, and then started to realise that, you know, I need to look for an alternative solution.
And take us through the past, say, 23 years of the company. How's it evolved over the 23 years, and who's involved in the business today?
The business is really punctuated by 2008. So the work that we did prior to 2008 and the work that we did post. Prior to 2008, we used to build a beautiful house. That was the display, effectively. 2008 came along and changed the world in so many ways. Then all we really did was bring forward the off-the-plan concept, and, you know, what we were building at the end of the project had to be all of a sudden morphed into what we were going to build, and then we changed from high-end residential luxury houses to what I'd call boutique developments, and we had to sell the dream. We had to communicate to the customers if we'd built it and bring that forward in our marketing. So that's what's transpired.
And take us through some of the projects you've got underway at the moment. We're in the display suite of your next project here in Melbourne. What's the scope? What are you trying to achieve with this development?
Yeah, so here at Melbourne, we bought a site that's just over an acre, and it's going to be a really mixed use site. We've got about an acre of retail on the ground floor plane. We're abutting two major roads, Glenferrie and Dandenong roads. It's going to be a mixture of retail uses, a pub, gastro pub, and then above that it'll be sort of designed with two apartment buildings above it. One's a smaller one, one's a larger one, and they'll all have aspects to the bay, the city, as well as the mountains, and it'll cater for largely owner occupiers all the way up to empty nesters.
And how did this opportunity come about? I mean, was it a site that you sort of had your eye on for some time when you purchased it? I think it was 2017 when you did purchase it, or were you just sort of in the mode of acquisition and it came online and you snapped it up?
We're in acquisition mode. It was advertised through Colliers, so we went through a full EOI campaign and had bought it from the then vendor Mark Roselon, ex-Toll. Mark had collected a variety of sites over a period of 10 years and had put together the intent of doing a large-scale development. And I guess we just went through the process of making sure that we got the right architects involved, the right interior people involved, the right intent, and developed the site into what's now going to be 265 apartments, an acre of retail, and fabulous sort of customer experience with what's on offer.
And where are you at with the sales process at the moment? I think we were mentioning off camera you've been pretty successful already. Where's the project at now?
Of the 265 available for sale, we've sold 130. So just over, just on halfway through. Looking at we're just opening up back after COVID, so we expect to sell the balance of those on the way through as we start construction in the next sort of month or so. We've had good take-up. I think it's been a challenging 6 months for any developer, not just Kokoda, to get those sold, but we're seeing the market come back now.
Now, you're one of the few developers, it would seem, that develops properties here in Victoria, but also crosses state boundaries and develops in Queensland. Why do you see opportunity in other states, and how difficult is it to have projects on the go in other states when you live in Victoria?
Look, I guess we started to get itchy feet about 6 years ago and wanted to go and look abroad, and our definition of that was either in Sydney or in Queensland. We originally offered on a couple of sites in Sydney and were unsuccessful. And then as a couple of sites had come up in Brisbane, we took the opportunity. Our motivation was really to look at and find new ways to develop. We'd done over 100 projects in Melbourne, and we're looking for new opportunities and new experiences and fundamentally new lessons. So we took that up. We took that as the opportunity to develop a project in Brisbane that we felt like had an amazing amenity. Just the quality of architecture and the quality of offering just wasn't on offer in Brisbane. And we felt that we could bring to it that something we'd done in Melbourne for years and offer the customer something that hadn't been offered.
A common theme throughout all of your developments, it seems, and the homes that you did prior to sort of apartment developments is, as you said, the need for quality and craftsmanship. Where does that come from? Is that something you've always sort of had an eye on? Have you always been particular about having attention to detail and using the right materials?
Early days when we were doing those luxury houses in inner suburbs of Melbourne, I was fascinated with classical architecture, and some of the architects' interior designs we used were fastidious about detail and textures and surfaces and things like that. So that became ingrained in what I really love and what I love the creative process. So to take something that I'd learnt previously and embed that in as best we could into high scale or high density development, that was something that I think is something that comes through. So every one of our apartments has oak floors, marble tops and Miele appliances. That happens in a house in Turk worth 10 million. So it's imperative, I think, to give to you don't need to be wealthy to own quality.
And what about the sector at the moment? I mean, you've been in the game for over 23 years now. How have you seen it? I mean, is it a lot more competitive now to 25 years ago, say?
Look, I think we've had two significant market corrections in that period of time. We've had 2008 and we've had what's happened in COVID in the last 6 months, literally. And two things have impacted the market, I think, significantly in that period of time. I think buying the sites always remains fundamental. We have a saying in our business, the profit is in the purchase. But outside of that, there's two things that have impacted it. There's debt, and the banks have retracted. In 2008, they retracted. And again, 4 or 5 years ago, when APRA stepped in and said, any significant deals above 100 million, you're going to find it difficult to get debt. That causes us to go overseas to get our debt. And the other thing that's really changed in the last few years is the government's view on foreign purchases, and effectively penalising anybody who's from abroad with a higher rate of stamp duty, which has impacted sales. So the market has changed. I think there's fewer developers in the market today than there ever has been, merely because it's hard to get debt coverage, get sales, and get your project going.
Now, this site here, I think you mentioned earlier, was purchased on market. Do you have a preference for on market or off market, or are you seeing any opportunities in one mode of sale as opposed to the other?
You know, if you buy on market, you certainly understand the competitiveness of and I think you're buying it what you deem to be good value if you transact. If you buy off market, there's always a risk of some of the unknown. I think off market provides the opportunity for longer DDs, effectively. On market, you in a competitive environment, you don't get that opportunity, generally speaking. But either way, it doesn't matter. If you know what you're doing, you should be right.
You've partnered with lenders such as Goldman Sachs from overseas, as opposed to, in some instances, domestic banks. Is there one or the other that you prefer, or is one or the other more competitive, or is it sort of all done on a project-by-project basis?
You know, lending is a thing like buyers that comes and goes, fits and starts. Goldman Sachs were, really good to Kokoda when we found it hard to get debt from a local Australian bank. 4 years ago, when we needed to get that debt because the rules had changed. It is, it's way more competitive to borrow locally than it is going to be to borrow abroad. But if you've got a business that's a going concern and you need to continue to operate, then sometimes they're the options that are available to you.
What do you think are the key considerations that buyers make when looking at your developments over others?
A buyer goes through a variety of decisions to purchase, whether it be from us or anybody else. I think what's key is the value proposition, better or worse than somebody else. So the quality that we offer, is that comparable? Is it better? Is it worse? Is it good value? Consumers today are way more in tune with what's important to them. It'll be access, it'll be amenity, it'll be education, it'll be healthcare, it'll be all those things. And does your project offer that? So it's not just necessarily what the building is offering, or the metre rate that you're offering, or the price point, but it's also what amenity you're immediately offering to make the lifestyle of that buyer better than what they currently have.
There's been what would seem like consolidation within the construction sector at the moment. With everything that's happened this year, have you seen construction prices come down at all, or at least are tenders becoming more competitive between builders?
Interesting enough, I think builders that are keen to get the work certainly give the message at the very beginning, we're keen to do it and we'll work with them. There certainly are those in the marketplace, but I've had the same experience in Brisbane as I have had in Victoria. Prices don't seem to be coming down. At the moment, they're not going up. I think they're coming off marginally. I don't think it's significant. Nothing that would sort of impact the FISO more than you would had anticipated. But yeah, no, I just think it's a place at the moment that build prices are staying where they are, and I think they'll come back up. I think that's as more developers come back into the marketplace, there'll be more demand, and that'll be the story.
And when you are selecting a builder, I mean, obviously quality is so important to the Kokoda Property Group brand. What do you look for in that relationship with your builders, or for that matter, with your consultants and your partners and all those third parties?
That's an imperative point for us to manage. We have a clause in our building contracts where we get to sign off on all the finishing trades. So even when we use builders like Hutchinson's as an example, our guys on the ground go to sign off from painters, renderers. So any finishing trade or any finished surface within the apartment, we need to have a say in that process in order to make sure that we uphold the quality that we promised, that we've marketed, that we said to somebody that this is what you're going to get. So we go to great extents internally to make sure that the quality that we deliver is consistent with the promise that we made.
In terms of the business itself, what sort of culture have you built there, and how important is leadership and leadership qualities for you?
Development by nature is an entrepreneurial business. We take big risks, we buy sites, we hope to get a permit, we hope to sell it, we hope to construct it, and we hope to deliver it. I mean, there's a lot of hopes in the delivery or the expectation of a project. That breeds a certain quality of characteristics necessary to put up the pressure of what comes with development. Every one of those facets, there's challenges that come their way, and I think leadership is trying to as best you can, keep you cool in, sometimes pretty intense situations. And sometimes, there's three things fundamentally in a development. You've got to build them, you've got to fund them, and you've got to be able to sell them. You'll always run into an issue in one of those three things. So you need to navigate your way through that issue and how best to. And sometimes they're hard, sometimes it's a grind, sometimes it's easy. But there'll always be an issue. That's a given.
And I think it was back in 2017 when you brought Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, out to Australia for a conference on sort of strategy and leadership. Tell us why you did that. What was the impetus for doing that?
I'm fascinated with entrepreneurs particularly, and particularly people in business that I consider successful, because I'm big into learning. Anything you can sort of garnish from somebody and apply it to your own business is a real attribute, I think, and I think it's something that's important to have in your business and in your culture. So I really wanted to get somebody who was left of field, who really didn't understand anything about property development, but the skills are transferable. So here's a guy that starts with an Apple computer or the idea of it in a garage in San Francisco, wants to start up a business. He was the mechanic, if you like, and Jobs was the salesman. And he really imparted and shared his passion and the detail. And for a guy that was, I think Steve was close to 70 when he had him come out, the passion just exuded. He could talk about programming and hardware as if it was like yesterday. And he talked about his work ethic. He said he wouldn't go home until it was 4 a.m. in the morning. And he shared that with the team, and I thought it was important for our team to see what it takes to be successful. And that after that you've got a choice to make. So he was really good in having somebody that understood what it took to become successful in business, and to share that experience with our staff. And we brought in our banks and some of our consultants as well to share that experience. It was kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, and we took the opportunity to share it with everybody.
And who else do you look up to then, or who else are you inspired by, either from an Australian business context or from an international perspective?
The same time we had Steve come out, we also had colleagues of Simon Sinek attend. And what was good about him was, I don't know if you've seen the Google talk that Sinek's given, 34 billion hits. He's been fantastic talk about the customer and what it meant for the customer. So David came out and gave his presentation and again shared it with the team. I think that those sort of guys are really inspirational. I'm a big believer of authenticity and modesty. I'm a big believer of Buffett. I follow that profile of person. I think there's a lot to say about how they go about conducting themselves. It's not a lot of show and go. It's about what they stand in, and you'll get to. They exude that quality, and I think that's something that's important in business. I think to be authentic, to learn, to look after your people, to look after your customer. I think it's a fundamental attribute necessary in business.
And you've built that within your business, it sounds like.
It's only aspire to that. I mean, that's, we don't get it perfect. There wouldn't be everybody that comes across our path that says they've had the best experience. But we set standards for ourselves really high, and we try to achieve those, on a daily basis. Sometimes I feel like we're trying to achieve the impossible sometimes, but that kind of makes it fun, and it makes it hard work, and and sometimes you wake up and you go, well, this is kind of what we've done, and against all odds. But I think it's nice to strive for something that you think is just beyond your grasp, and that's something that we work at every day.
And when you look at the market today, I mean, what's the biggest opportunity, or what are the biggest challenges you see as an experienced developer, either in Victoria or in Queensland?
As our jobs have become larger, relationships have become more important and more fundamental to the success. And so relationships with banks, relationships with consultants, relationships with your customer, and relationships with sales agents, I think they become really good. And I think when we've tripped or faltered. I think the relationship, if you look a bit deeper, there's a relationship that's tripped or faltered. So we're cognizant of trying to hold those relationships at the highest level in the business. And I think that becomes important to the success of a business. Like I said, you'll always have one of the three things go awry, and you'll look deeper and you'll find that something's gone structurally broken down.
And what inspires you? I mean, what keeps you coming to work, building fantastic developments like this, taking your quality and the scope of the development to a next level, instead of just throwing in the towel and saying, well, I've had a great career, I might just wind back now. What keeps you motivated and going to work?
You've got to have a systemic process, and you've got to have a why that takes you further than just the next job. I love learning. I really enjoy business. I think that it's fascinating, and I love to learn from people that have become very successful and humble in their achievements. That's the part that I enjoy the most. Without a doubt, it comes with its challenges. And every time you sign on to a new job, it's not about do I want to do it, don't I want to do it. It's about what will this add to a career that's already been 20 plus years. I think in our industry, there's not a lot of long-term developers that have been successful over a long period of time. I think there's plenty of people who have been in the business and have lasted between 5 and 10 years and said, this is hard work, I'm out. So I think there's something to be written for, and something to be very proud of for being in the business for a long time.
And presumably that's a real sort of drawing card as well for potential buyers that are coming into your developments, that you are an experienced development group, you're an experienced developer yourself. Is that a real sort of draw card for buyers, given you've got a proven track record?
I think it's an important element of why a buyer might choose you over somebody else. I don't think it's a deciding thing. I think that comes down to who you are as a business and your culture. Whether you choose not to buy from us or you do on that particular day, we'll still do what we do, and that's actually look after the buyer. We will often go back to apartments and assist with refurbishments and help long after the builder's warranty is expired, because we want to have a continual relationship with the buyer.
And it seems that the sector that you're most invested in and experienced in is apartment developments. Is there any? I know you've also done a townhouse development in Mordialloc. Why do you focus on the residential, particularly the apartment side, as opposed to potentially townhouses or office developments, industrial? Is that just your focus?
I think it's property's a bit of a slow-moving beast, and I think we've stuck at what we've known and tried to do that well. We're in the process. We just acquired a pub where we're sitting here at the moment, and we're looking at that, and we're running that. We've been running that for 12 months. That's looking like it's going to be a positive add-on to the business. Will we do more of those? Possibly. I think it's just we have looked at other sectors. We haven't invested in them as yet. But we'll slowly evolve and learn some other skill sets and add those in. That's what we've known. It's our knitting, it's our craft.
I did ask you before about banks. I've just got a follow-up question to that. What would make you choose a, say, CBA over a non-bank lender like a max cap for certain projects, or vice versa? I know you've worked with both closely. Yeah. What do you look for in that relationship?
Oh, look, I think if you ask that to any developer, they'd say we'd choose a major Australian bank before an alternative lender, merely because of the pricing. I mean, there's a significant, second biggest cost to construction is interest, and after that's overhead. So, but when you get to choose something like a max cap or another organisation, you've got to choose people that align with you, the same values. So they've got to make the transaction simple and easy. If they make it complicated, in a business that's already complicated, it's one stress you don't know.
Reflecting on your career today, what would be the best and worst deal you've ever done, do you think?
I think the best deal has come from the worst experience. 10 years ago, we bought a site in Camberwell, and it had some contamination. We didn't have the experience as we probably ought to have at that time. And so that became a costed exercise. We completed the job, but certainly had some difficult times during the development. 5 sites after that Louis bought all had contamination. We knew how to deal with it, and we were educated ourselves, and they became really profitable jobs and successful projects. So, the good comes from the bad.
What about Mark, the person outside of work? What are your sort of hobbies? Are you into certain sports? What keeps you active outside of this?
I'm a bit of an adrenaline freak, so I enjoy motocross and not really the typical sort of developer. I enjoy going to motocross tracks or anything that has an adrenaline charge to the fuel to it is something I do. I try to keep healthy when I can, but unfortunately there's an imbalance. I work more than I socialise, and sometimes that sort of pays the price. But yeah, I do like motorsport.
One final one. What's your outlook for 2021 and beyond? And then second part of that is, where do you take Kokoda Property Group next?
I think there will continue to be opportunity by virtue of the fact that the void left by those that choose not to develop in the market, whether it be in Brisbane, Sydney or Melbourne. And I think there'll be plenty coming forward. I think there's been a stagnant environment at the moment that's actually created this void for future demand, or to fill the future demand. So we're really positive about what is coming. So we're certainly in the process of trying to acquire more sites as we speak. I think it's, and the banks will open back up. I certainly see that at the moment. We're about to do our first deal with Commonwealth Bank and haven't done a major Australian bank deal for 3 years. So I think that also gives you some inroad into what the future sort of holds.
I did say final one, but this actually will be the final one. There'll be a lot of agents, commercial agents, watching this in particular. Yep. What's your mandate, either for not for the rest of this year, but into next year and beyond? Are you actively in acquisition mode for sites, or are you just sort of taking stock of what you've got underway? No,
definitely. Look, as we speak, we're in DD on 2 particular sites, both in Melbourne, and we're looking for, we're going to need to close out in the next 60 days. So we are, we're looking at sites and sort of carving up. So I think there's a real upside.
Mark Stevens, fantastic insights. Thanks so much for your time this morning.